So, a lot of the time I get asked by people, how do you make the movement mean something? Whatever style, unless it's a traditional dance that has a vocabulary like, for example, like ballet, traditional, any traditional dance where it has to be done in a certain way, it's this doesn't always work. If you're looking at ways to make it work on styles that you can use with improvisation, for example, so you can use it on street dance, contemporary dance. You can use it in those creative ways. You can use it in some traditional forms if it allows for it to be deconstructed. So if you've got a particular movement in whatever style it is, or if it's Indian dance or Afro-Cuban, and it has to be in that sort of way. Sometimes if you do it in a different way or with a different part of your body, it's not going to work. So for example, I'll start off with emotional movement, and it goes like, I'll get the group to first of all walk naturally, walk around the space. So they're walking around, and it's quite a free-flowing thing. They'll all be walking at the same time. And then what I'll do, I'll say freeze, and I'll stop, and I'll say walk as if you were angry. So what happens to the walk, what happens to the pathway, it stops meandering and it walks with purpose. Yeah, they're going from one space to another, and it becomes more angular and more direct. So if you then ask somebody to explain with their body what anger looks like, rather than it's mimetic, where I say it's mime, where it's like, oh, I'm going to hit you, or da-da, or but even those things, those movements, have the idea of anger. So what I would then get them to do is, even though they're walking, is identify what it is, sharp and angular, sharp and angular. So they might take a movement that they've already created, let's say something that's quite, that's done in a soft context. Let's just look at that movement that you're doing contemporary, for example. Sharp and angular. Add that vocabulary or that aesthetic to that movement. Even though one moment it's like this, it might go sharp and angular. But it's the same movement, but you've made it sharp and angular. So whatever choreography you have, whatever movement you have, if you start to apply these ideas of what the characteristics of an emotion are, then you'll start to be able to make dance that has some sort of feeling, rather than it just being, okay, for this whole section you're going to be angry. Yeah, you're going to be angry, but I can't be angry at that level for 5 minutes or 3 minutes. It's like, how does it start? So when you start to look at the idea of anger, then you can see, okay, it's got sometimes where it's smouldering, and the anger is like this. Yeah, it moves slowly. So that, again, taking that one movement that you had, it might be, okay, it's smouldering, it's smouldering, it's smouldering, it's smouldering, it's smouldering, it's smouldering, it's angled like that. And then the next one is like, bah, you explode. And it gives it texture. It gives the whole thing, gives the whole movement texture, rather than it being, I'm angry, bah, bah, gah, a million miles an hour, burn out, but it doesn't make it that interesting. If you've got pauses, stops, breaks, it's like me having a conversation. If I talk to you at one speed all the time and didn't take any breaths in, didn't take any pauses, it'd get boring and you won't have a clue what I'm trying to say. But if I slow it down and take some breaks and pauses, it gives the idea of what I'm trying to put across. It gives it context. So you can take that with any sort of movement. I could just say, okay, once I've done this idea of the pathways, sometimes I'll get people to sit on a chair, put a HUD or something over their head, and just move their hands in an emotion that they choose. So I'll just turn around this way. So for example, if I was just able to move my arms, and it was, okay, the idea was frustration. So a lot of the time you'll get this sort of movement. Yeah, a lot of hand, because we talk a lot with our hands, but it's like, okay, now imagine you can't use your hands to explain that frustration. What does it look like if you do it in just your arms? Yeah, it's the idea of frustration. How's it, you can't get to one place, it's blocked, but the only idea is that you can only use your arms. And then how does this feeling, this energy of frustration then go into your foot? And it might be, it feels odd. It feels odd to kind of say, okay, how can that one part of my foot or one part of my body be frustrated? But then it's like, okay, then you start to translate it into movement and how that movement can be frustrating, or it can be smooth. It can be, you're frustrated in the sense that but then obviously, look, we kind of go into, a popping vocabulary, and you might use it as popping, or you might just use it as contemporary dance. You might have flow to it, but there's frustration as you move in and out. I could go on and on and on. But what I'm trying to explain to you is that once you take that emotional idea, or what that emotion feels like, what it feels like, rather than what it looks like I'm angry or I'm in love. Yeah, what does love feel like? It's light. It's, that's one type of love. One type of love might be insatiable, it might be lust, but it has this idea of, okay, how can I go from it being quite soft and moving my body to being something that's just like, oh my God, if that person touches me again, I'm just going to fall into bits, because they're just absolutely amazing. Think of how you can make the journey, and think of how you can make the emotion talk about the journey, talk about that emotional journey. Next, I'll get a passage, I'll get a piece of text, and just talk about how you can work with text, you can work with rap, you can work with a newspaper clipping, you can work with a story, on how you make that progression and how you move forward to interpret text, interpret a story. So when you're on stage, you're not stuck. You don't get stuck for ways that you can add interesting levels to your choreography, to your storytelling, because that's what's going to keep people interested. It's great to have aesthetically pleasing movement. However, you can have aesthetically pleasing movement, but you can also have a narrative. And it makes your work accessible to a lot more people, because they can get the idea of you moving and a person moving and just be amazed by your facility. But then those people that are not so well versed in dance appreciation, especially if it's contemporary dance, oh my God, contemporary dance, navel gazing and all that, give them a level, everybody a level to engage in. So, as you can probably hear, it's getting a bit riotous outside the studio. So I'm going to wrap it up for now. If you have any questions, email me or subscribe somewhere around here. Just email me any questions that you have, and I'll get online and do something especially for those questions. Because if you've got a question, you've got an idea, you want to explore something, come online and we can do it together. See you on the other side.